Conducting tonight's induction ceremonies will be Robbie Davis Floyd, anthropologist and author of numerous books focusing on childbirth and midwifery.
We're going to start with 1969, when Stephen Gaskin, who later became Ina May's husband, was forming a major part of the countercultural revolution in the United States, teaching Monday night class in San Francisco. 1,500 people were attending these classes, were interviewed every night. They'd come to listen to Stephen talk about sex, drugs, rock and roll, and the meaning of life. How could you create a space in dominant culture for a countercultural alternative way of thinking and living? So it was in quest of that better life that 400 people set off with Stephen and Ina May in a caravan of buses across the country, looking for a place where they could make that better life come true. And it was on those buses that women in that community started to give birth. And Ina May started to realize that this new alternative community that was forming was going to need midwives. So finally they found 2,000 acres in rural Tennessee near Summertown. They communally bought the land and they created what they called the farm, very simply the farm, an intentional community, still today the longest living intentional community in the United States. And so the farm midwives began to train themselves to attend birth and to do prenatal care, and quickly to train other midwives, because they knew they would need more midwives to attend the growing number of women that were coming to their community. During these days, the farm midwives would accept anyone. If you showed up in labor at the gate, pregnant and needing help, they would take you in. They would even take your baby if you wanted them to. And they got help from a local obstetrician who taught them some techniques and gave them some information and hooked them up with the local hospital system. They had ambulances donated to the farm, so they created a safe system of transport for women who might need that. And Ina May began to keep very careful statistics about the kinds of births that they were attending, so that they were able to document their good outcomes. So these excellent outcomes began to earn the farm midwives a reputation, first nationally and then internationally. And it's important to understand this in the context of what was happening in the wider American culture, where most women were giving birth in hospitals hooked up to machines. The image of hospital birth was that the technology would do it for you and that women were really the givers of birth. Hospital birth was very, very interventionist and still is, with most labor is either induced or augmented with Pitocin, and a lot of vaginal exams, a lot of breaking of the waters. Hospital birth became an increasingly alien and technological experience. And here's Kathy's reaction to that. Couldn't we just talk first? And in 1977, Ina May wrote her first book. It was called Spiritual Midwifery, and it was about reclaiming the spirit in childbirth, bringing spirit back into birth, and thinking about energy. What does energy mean in birth? Ina May talked about contractions not as painful but as rushes. She used a different vocabulary. She called a contraction a rush, and she talked about the birth energy and about the experience of people at birth, their responsibility for the kind of energy they bring to birth. If someone was there with negative energy, it could impede the whole birth process. So part of the midwife's job became to monitor the energies in the room and to see whose energy might be down and whose energy might need lifting or who might need to be sent out. At the same time, the farm midwives were developing extraordinary techniques for attending what would be considered dangerous births. This is a footling breech that the farm midwives attended at home. They developed excellent techniques for attending difficult births that in the hospital would immediately result in a cesarean. And they safely attended hundreds of breech births. Ina May made a video about breech birth, and these are midwives from all over the world watching her video, which is now used in midwifery and obstetrical training courses around the world. And after the Guatemalan earthquake in the 70s, the farm community sent a bunch of people down to Guatemala to help with earthquake relief. And these people found themselves doing primary health care for kids and discovering that kids down there were very malnourished. A lot of babies were dying because of poor nutrition. So they created a soy milk factory, a soy dairy factory, and they taught Guatemalan mothers how to use soy for their kids, lots of different ways of preparing it, how to grow it. And they greatly helped improve the nutritional status of the children that they were working with in Guatemala. And while Ina May was down there in Guatemala, she learned traditional techniques for birth from a number of Guatemalan midwives. And she brought some of those techniques back to the States. And one of them was a technique for attending shoulder dystocia, which is when the baby's shoulders get stuck when the baby comes out. And it involved putting the woman on her hands and knees. This was a concept unheard of in America at the time. But Ina May popularized this technique and was actually asked to teach about it in medical schools all over the country. It now bears her name. It's called the Gaskin maneuver. And it's been published in medical journals. And physicians all over the country are starting to talk about this amazing new technique called the Gaskin maneuver. And we have Ina May to thank for bringing it. And here she's being crowned as an honorary obstetrician. And here's a group of nurse midwives coming to the farm to study childbirth with Ina May and her fellow midwives. And here Ina May is teaching Gudgy Cook, who went back to the Mohawk Nation to recreate traditional midwifery among the Mohawk after learning midwifery on the farm with Ina May. So you can see how this model of birth that the farm midwives created has been spreading. Here's an obstetrician who came to the farm to give birth, looking for the natural birth she knew she couldn't find in any American hospital. She and her husband, who's also an obstetrician, came to the farm and gave birth to their baby on the farm. Now, as you know, the theme of this conference is the goddess, the creative goddess. And a lot of goddesses, a lot of witches were hanged. A lot of women were burned at the stake or hanged as witches in the Middle Ages and in the Renaissance. And a lot of those women were midwives. So it's a part of midwifery lore that the witch hunt is out there. The doctors are out to get you. They'll still burn you at the stake. And in fact, that's true. Many midwives like Ina May have been prosecuted, have been arrested, have been put in jail. And so Ina May has created for the public and for young women and for women of my age as well, she's created an image of women as powerful creative goddesses as they give birth. And this is the legacy that she gives not only to the young women of the farm whom you see in this picture, but also to the women of the world. Thank you.
The first living inductee and the first female inductee into the Counterculture Hall of Fame, Ina May Gaskin.
Is that the trophy? We should do a photo
op. Words can't express to you how grateful and what a great honor I feel it is that has been bestowed upon me to be inducted into this Counterculture Hall of Fame. I have drawn my inspiration from the counterculture since I was a teenager in a little town in Iowa, and I listened to Louis Armstrong and all the great jazz musicians. And then later on, as I became a hippie, it was Bob Marley fed my soul. I'm also grateful that I can accept this as a living person. This is really something to be grateful for. So I want to thank everybody who's come here tonight to honor me, to the people of High Times, to all the great musicians and the goddesses and you wonderful activists and people who are working in the trenches. I honor you all. Good night, all. Enjoy the show.
A warm welcome for Ina May Gaskin, the newest inductee to the Countercultural Hall of Fame.